Welcome back to our next episode where we're covering CompTIA Security Plus objectives. Specifically today, this episode will be covering Objective 2.2. Describe common threats, threat actors, and motivations. So I'm going to switch to see the actual document here that gives the different objectives here. So describe common threat actors and motivations. So who is doing this, or what entity, because it might not just be a person, but maybe an organization. We'll talk a little bit about that. And also we're going to talk about their motivations. So we'll start by talking about threat actors, what threat actors are and the different threat actors there are out there. Then we're going to get into their motivations and what motivations they have, and then just a few attributes of those actors. And so I'm going to actually be covering a couple things here. I'm going to cover all of the objectives, but I'm also going to kind of specify where I think the CompTIA Security Plus went a little astray, went a little wrong with it. And so I'm going to interject a few things as we go along. So with that being said, let me pull up the lesson again. And let's get into this. Before I do that, though, I do want to do a shout out to Aurelius Maximus, who says, hey, you explained really well. So I always really appreciate comments like this. This is a comment from a YouTuber, and this is what keeps me motivated and doing this stuff. So I always appreciate those thank yous and those great comments that you give out there, because that keeps me going and creating these things for you. All right, there is, to start out with, we'll talk about these threat actors. We're going to talk about advanced persistent threat, crime syndicate and organization, terrorists, unskilled attackers, hacktivists, insiders, accidental and unintentional, competitor, and state-sponsored. So we'll just kind of hit a bunch of those different threat actors and what they look like. So what is a threat actor? Threat actor is the person that is carrying out the attack, is either intentionally or unintentionally doing something to your network, to your organization, to your people within your users, your people that are within your organization, your employers. So threat actors is the one that is carrying out that type of an attack. And a threat actor could be a person, or it could be like an entity. And there are different names for these threat actors. So we call them adversaries, or sometimes hackers, depending on what they're doing, what type of hacking that they're doing. Maybe scammers if they're carrying out some sort of scams. So different names for these threat actors. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over a bunch of different threat actors and what those motivations are. So one of the types of threat actors there are advanced persistent threat. There's two sides to advanced persistent threat. There's the advanced part. This means that they have more skills. You see, there are some people out there that are hackers that are low on the skill level here. So they're at that basic level and unskilled, or often we call those script kiddies. Well, advanced persistent threat is on the other side of this. They are advanced. So that is one side of this. The other side of this is this persistent. So they are persistently pursuing something. So a lot of times we think of maybe they've hacked into your network, they are persistent on that network, and now they're causing damage to that network, and we have not discovered them yet. So that's an advanced persistent threat, or an APT, and those are the ones that are the most dangerous there. All right. There also is, so we're going to be going over kind of characteristics of a threat actor. We're going to be talking about a bit about motivation, the relationship to the organization, resources they might have, sponsorship, levels of sophistication. So this is what I've created as you're analyzing a threat actor. These are some of the things that you will be analyzing for, and will depend on how much defenses you're going to need for your organization based off of that profile that we create for that. But one of the things that we need to get into is sponsorship. So not all threat actors are acting alone. We think of often that hacker that's sitting on their desk and they're or at home and they're trying to type and hack somebody, but sometimes they're in an office building with other hackers, and they're an organization that is hacking. Maybe it's a government agency, maybe it's an actual business. So the crime syndicate or organized crime is one of those. And what immediately jumps to my mind is like these scammer call centers that we see in some other countries that are set up, and they actually train their employees. They have employee meetings. They go through a process of like teaching them how to do the scams, and then they carry out those type of scams. So that would be an example of organized crime where it's actually a business. It's a business that's running that is illegal because of what they're doing, but it is a form of organized crime. And a lot of times the motivation behind these is money, that they were trying to get more money. All right. Often we see that there are some sort of threat actors out there because based off of some sort of political or philosophical change, they're trying to implement some sort of change. They want to enact something. And so one example of that are terrorists. So terrorists are the people that are out there that are causing harm to other entities because of some sort of political or philosophical change that they're trying to make. Another term that we have for this is activism or hacktivism. Hacktivism is like taking something and they're fighting for something. But terrorism is like a group of people that are trying to carry out these type of attacks, and it's almost like within a warfare for them. So that can be problematic. All right, we've got unskilled attackers. So it used to be that they would call unskilled attackers script kiddies. So a lot of papers that you'll see, they'll call them script kiddies. But essentially why this even exists is because a lot of times they'll just like, oh, well, there is something that I've read online on how to hack. I'm just going to try that out on this network and see if I can do it. And they're just kind of curious a lot of the times and trying to try different things. So they're unskilled. They don't really know what they're doing, but they're taking what they've read on the internet and carrying it out or doing it. Or they have some sort of script that they're running. It's just a program that they've downloaded or a script that they've downloaded, and they run that script, which is why you have this term script kiddie. They're just taking scripts and running those scripts. So advanced hackers will use scripts as well, but they have a lot of knowledge behind it. An advanced persistent threat has a lot of knowledge on what they're doing versus a script kiddie is just not sure what they're doing. They're just running these scripts or they're following directions on how to do it. All right, I already mentioned the hacktivist, so this would be somebody who is trying to carry out some sort of political or philosophical change, and so they're some sort of activism, and so there are groups out there that are trying to do that. There are insider threats, so a lot of times when we think of a hacker or an hacktivist, or they could be external from the company, but let's say you have a disgruntled employee on the inside or somebody who's trying to embezzle, or they could be somebody on the inside. So there are insider threats as well, not just external threats to our system. And this actually plays into our next one, accidental or unintentional. What that means is that this person on the inside could be actively trying to hack a box and trying to figure out how to leverage it, or maybe embezzle money or do something like that. People to steal money essentially is what embezzlement is. So that's what they're trying to do, but it might be unintentional as well. In fact, this has been the biggest threats that I've seen in the past, is that my employees or maybe other employees in the company have misconfigured something, or maybe they've unintentionally clicked on a link, or they've unintentionally done something within the bounds of the network, and they're not intending to carry out an attack, but their actions cause problems, either opens up vulnerabilities that will allow a hacker to hack from the outside, or they'll unintentionally do something within the inside. And one of those examples is shadow IT. And we'll get maybe a little bit into shadow IT. But essentially, we got to look at for these insider threats as well as outsider threats, and things that are both accidental and unintentional. That just means that they didn't intend to, have some sort of threat or carry out something. All right. I mentioned about sponsorship, about who is sponsoring. So sponsorship would be like who is facilitating this hacking. So I might be a hacker and somebody might actually hire me to do the hacking. Or maybe I am an employee for a company that does hacking. Well, one example of who could be sponsoring is a business against another business, because there's some sort of competitive advantage. So a competitor to a business might be the one carrying out the attack. Maybe they're trying to do data exfiltration, that is, steal data so they can get a competitive edge. Maybe they're trying to do a denial of service so that people can't get those services and instead will come and use their services. So who sponsorship could be a example, or a competitor could be an example of that. So other businesses here. We've talked a little bit about terrorism and organized crime, but one of those is competitors. Other competitors could be carrying that out. There's also state-sponsored. So state-sponsored means that there's a government that is sponsoring this. So a government is supporting this. A government is hiring these people to go out and attack maybe another government. And so they're trying to facilitate some sort of change. And so it could be state-sponsored. And we see this often with wars. All right. Next up, we're going to go get into the motivations of these threat actors. What motivates them? Now, this is where I see that I feel like the CompTIA Security Plus got a little wrong with some of these, and I'll explain as we go along, but you're going to hear me complain. But before we do that, I'm going to jump into just, when we're out there in the field working on this stuff, one thing that I hear often is that people get they get that imposter syndrome, like, oh, I don't really know what I'm doing and I feel like I'm in the wrong place. I'm shocked that I got hired. I'm shocked that I'm getting the salary that I am. I'm shocked about this. And part of the problem is that whatever training they went through didn't adequately prepare them. It's kind of like looking at a picture and you're only looking at certain snippets of that picture and you don't have the full view, and you walk in and you're like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And some of that is just because typical IT training doesn't prepare you well enough. And so one thing that I've incorporated into the courses that I have, because I have a whole bunch of courses to train you to be successful. And one of the things that I've really done is focused on that big picture of what it looks like, how this applies to the real world. And really, I incorporate real world application. I take a deep dive into these topics. It's not surface level. You really understand it. And we take a comprehensive approach where we look at it from all different angles. This gives you that big picture, and by understanding the big picture, then we understand its parts, and we don't feel like we have these gaps in our knowledge when it comes to these. So really, typical IT training can be really frustrating. I'm going to expand on things and give you real world, and this is an example. As we go through these motivations, I'm going to tell you exactly how I think that CompTIA Security Plus gets it wrong and what the real world really has to it. So there's a lot of advantage. I just listed a few here, but there are a lot of advantages of taking your training through TechnoSurge to prepare you for the future. So that way, when you walk into your career, you nail it the first time and you feel confident in what you're doing. You know what to do because you have a lot of application skills and you've worked with the actual equipment, and because I've got lots of labs and that type of thing. So really making you feel comfortable when you get out there in the real world. So I have a membership. I have actually down below for cybersecurity specifically, I have a whole system. It's a bundle of courses that you can take, and it's all revolves around the system that really makes you successful in your career and moving into your whatever your next job is, or that promotion, or getting your first job, or whatever. It's going to prepare you really well for that. So check that out. It's down in my link. If you're ready to crush your career and be successful, check that link out. Go and sign up for that bundle and start today. Don't wait. And why would you want to wait on taking steps towards your success and towards your future? Okay. Now motivation, getting into motivation. So we do things because we're motivated to do something. There is something that's propelling us forward, something that we're trying to achieve. What is that motivation? Well, I've listed them out here. This is kind of my summation of the different characteristics. It could be challenge or curiosity, notoriety, like fame, like, hey, I'm a little different than everybody else because, hey, look what I was able to do. It could be power, this feeling of power, of being able to have power over something or power over somebody or power over an organization. It could be revenge or vindictiveness. I don't like this company, and so I'm going to get revenge on it. It could be financial. A lot of things that are happening right now is because there's some sort of financial reward. They're like ransomware. They take over your computer and you've got to pay me, otherwise you're not going to get access to your files. They're trying to promote some sort of change. They have some sort of ideology that they want to conform to, maybe some sort of political or some sort of activism. So they're trying to get change to happen. It could be testing and research and development. Like that's one of the things that we hack for. We hack so that way we can do research and development and kind of see what are the weaknesses in our network. So pen testing is a good example of this. And I've also got here, just get work done. Like there are times when IT can be a hindrance to some of the departments, to some of our efforts, because we slow things down. We're like, okay, well, let's take a look. Is this really secure? Is this service really what we need as a company? And that frustrates some people, and so they go around IT, and that can be a problem in itself. So there's different motivations of why these threat actors carry out these type of attacks of what they do. So what is one of those? Well, financial. Financial is pretty straightforward. They want money. They see like some sort of scam that will get them money. They see some sort of actions they can take to steal money from an organization. So they take those steps, and that's what they do. So a lot of it is financial reward. Some of it is influence. I kind of picture this maybe like more power or notoriety, where they've got influence over something, or maybe it's some sort of influence over some sort of change. So they have influence over it. And so here's one that I kind of deviate a little bit from. Is influence really a motivation? No, it's the trying to get notoriety or power or change behind that influence. The influence is the action itself. The influence is trying to carry out that attack. So I think they kind of get it wrong in that perspective. Intellectual property. Here's another thing too, is typically intellectual property is an objective. It's not what I'm after, right? Well, first of all, what is intellectual property? Intellectual property is something that if I create something, like I've created these slides and I put them out there, if I create these slides, then those slides belong to me. They're mine. I have the intellectual property over it. If somebody were to steal those slides, then that would give them a competitive advantage, because I put a lot of time and effort into these slides, and I spend a ton of time researching what I should do and what order and how I should present this information, and somebody stealing that can be a hindrance to me and a benefit to them. So what would their motivation be? Here again, I don't think intellectual property itself is a motivation. Their motivation is maybe some sort of financial gain, or maybe they're trying to enact some sort of revenge against me, or maybe it's going to be some sort of power struggle. So that's really the motivation behind intellectual property, but intellectual property is a means to that end. Okay, notoriety is another one. So just that, hey, I am special, or I amount to something, like I can do something that other people can't do. And so by hacking something and proving that you can hack something gives you the, hey, I'm number one, I've done something here. So that could be a motivation to somebody. Espionage. Here again, espionage is not a motivation. Why did they lump it into motivations? I don't know. Espionage is something that you do. You're stealing information. You're stealing data. You're stealing stuff. That is espionage. There's corporate espionage. You're stealing it from another corporation, another business. But there's more often we associate this with governments. A government doing espionage against another government. They're stealing secrets from another government. So why are they doing that? Well, the true motivation behind that is some sort of power or change. And so that's really the motivation behind it. So there again, another thing, I think they went a little astray. Motivation is fear or chaos. That one's, I could see that. Usually, why are they promoting fear or chaos? Well, here again, it's probably because they're trying to get revenge against somebody. They're probably trying to have notoriety. Hey, look at what I've done. So a lot of it is power. They feel like, hey, if I can disrupt somebody else's work, which I think is cruel and mean, and I hate that type of attitude, but it is a power struggle that they're creating, because they're creating fear and chaos. So once again, fear and chaos is a means to the end, and their motivation is actually that end. Extortion. So this is extortion is when somebody is trying to steal or manipulate or carry out some sort of threat, or they're threatening somebody that if you don't do this, then I am going to do this. And so they're using it, once again, a means to the end. So what is the end? Well, a lot of times it's some sort of financial, that they're saying, hey, I am going to do this unless you do this. We also call that blackmail. That would be blackmail would be a form of extortion. So there's extortion. All right, general curiosity. Now this is where a lot of younger, less experienced ones are coming from, is, hey, what happens? It's fairly simple to carry out a denial of service attack. So what happens if I carry out a denial of service attack? How easy can I do this? And I can relate to this one. I remember causing some headaches for my computer instructor back in high school, because we would just see it as kind of a challenge of how can we get around the security blocks. That we try not to do anything too mischievous, but how can we get around these blocks to that are put in place to get us from getting around those blocks. So it was just kind of fun, and we were curious, and it was a challenge. So I definitely can relate to that one right there. All right, and then revenge. I mentioned revenge many times. It just means that, hey, I am not happy with you, and I'm going to make you suffer because I'm suffering. So that is revenge or vindictiveness. I'm going to get even. There's some sort of ideological change that they have there. So they have an idea that the world should be this way, but it's this way, and I need to do something to make movement so that way it changes into more of a world that I think. And we see this things with things like terrorism. There are terrorist groups of people that carry out attacks, and a lot of those are cyber attacks. So they have some sort of ideology around what the world should be, and they think that their actions is going to get them there, even though many times, I can just tell you many times, it's the inverse of what they're trying to do. They actually are causing more harm to what they think is, it doesn't move them in the right direction. It moves them in the opposite direction. So it's kind of silly, but politics, and there's some sort of political change that they're trying to enact. There are also ethical things. Once again, here we view things at one way, and maybe the world is not ethical, and we need to carry out an attack to make them more ethical, which here again is hypocritical. That doesn't add up. And so I've definitely seen that out there. And then there's war, and that's to implement some sort of change or power, or usually when we talk about war, we're usually talking about it at the government level, that one government has declared war against another government. And so they're trying to get power over that other government. Okay. So there we go. We've covered quite a few of the motivations, both the ones that I have and the ones that the CompTIA Security Plus has. I just wanted to pull up, let's see, this document again so we can take a look at where we're at. So we've gone over the threat actors here. We've gone over the motivations, and now we're going to get into attributes of the actor. What are some of the attributes? Okay, well, I already mentioned that there are insider threats into your company. So we're going to get into internal versus external. We're also going to get into resource and funding and levels of sophistication / capabilities. So before I jump into this, I am curious. So I elaborated on a lot of those. I do a lot of extra research, and I pulled together from actual sources like NIST, what is the going ideas out there. Many times I pull in multiple ideas of maybe a definition of something. And so I expand on things. Is that something that you're interested in? I would like to hear about that. I'm adding all this extra stuff to it rather than just sticking strictly with the objectives. Do you want to just know what the objectives are for the test so you can pass this test? Or are you interested in actually finding out more about the real world and what the real world, how it operates and views things? Because it's not so singular like a objective to a test is. An objective might have one definition, but when you get out there in the real world, there could be 3 different definitions for something. Like personal identifiable information is an example of that. There are many different definitions to what PII is, and the problem is since we have different definitions to it, things don't always jive. They don't always line up. So if you aren't aware of those different definitions, you could be talking to somebody and you're not talking the same language because you have different definitions for it, which causes problems. So I elaborate much more than what you would just need for the test. So my question for you is, do you want that? Would you desire that? So down in the comments below, option A is just explain just what I need to know to take the test. And option B would be, no, I want to know not just what is on the test, but how to actually apply this to the real world. So, okay. All right, attributes of an actor. So this is what I've kind of come up with as a general overview of attributes of an actor. You've got their motivation. Why are they motivated to do what they're going to do? You've got the relationship to the organization. So there's internal users within the organization or internal people within the organization, and you got external. You got the number of resources that they have. Resources a lot of times just means money. Do they have a little bit of money or a lot of money? Do they have a little bit of scripts or a lot of scripts? Do they have a little bit of knowledge or a lot of knowledge? And kind of all together, we call that capabilities, something that we don't define here in the CompTIA Security Plus, but capabilities is a term that we use for understanding how much resources they have and knowledge and skill and everything that they have to be able to carry out an attack. Okay, sponsorship. The sponsorship is, are they self-sponsored, meaning that they're just acting alone? Is it a corporation? Is it organized crime? Is it a whole government? And then also the level of sophistication. Do they rank really low on skilled and knowledge, or are they very high on that? All right, I mentioned internal and external, that there are people within your organization and people external from your organization. And how we guard against those looks very different. And one of the reasons why we practice defense in depth is because we just understand there are internal threats. And those internal threats are not always intentional. Many times those can be unintentional. In fact, more often than not, they're unintentional. And I find it's one of the biggest threats to security of the organizations that I've worked for. All right, resource and funding. We mentioned resource and funding already, so I won't get too much into that. And then levels of sophistication and capabilities. Here's where I mentioned the capabilities. So the capabilities is just like what are they capable of carrying out? And that's a function of a few different things. Like I say, it's a function of how much money they have, that they can go and maybe purchase a specific malware that's not known to the rest of the world yet. It could be how much knowledge and skill they have, how much resources, like how much like friends and coworkers and stuff they can reach out to that are doing the same thing and get information. Those all play into what is the capabilities, what are they capable of carrying out because of the resources that are behind them and the skill and knowledge behind them. Okay, so there we go. We've gone over all of the objectives here for the CompTIA Security Plus. Here it is. Right here. So here again, once again, I cover, this is a fast overview, which these are intended to be a fast overview of all of these different aspects of the objectives. But are you interested in knowing a little bit more? So remember that comment that I would like you to hear from you, so I know how to make future, here it is again, how I can make future videos to help you the best. Do you want me to explain just the objectives and that's all? Or do you want to actually know real world, like what you will see out there? And that creates more elaboration, and I actually expand on things and give you that full knowledge and depth into it. So if you're interested in that, put that down in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for watching this video, and we'll catch you on the next one.